On today's video, we're going to deal with testing a few different products to remove scratches from motorcycle windshields. We have an example here of a 13-year-old Kawasaki sport bike windshield that's got some deep scratches in it. We're going to try several different products that I already have in stock and 2000 grit sandpaper. The rest of it is pretty much labor, but it should give you enough information that if you truly have a windshield on a motorcycle, or actually anything made out of plexiglass, even the headlights of your car. This system that I'm showing and the products that I'm showing, they should work very easy, whether you do it by hand or if you have a little hand buffer, or in some cases if you even have a professional buffer. This technique works very well. Now, one of the questions that comes up almost on a regular basis is I have a windshield on my bike and I hit a stone, a chip, or whatever, or scratch, or somehow it has some little defects in it, and how can I get them out easily? Well, we've put that question out to the people on the A-team. Several people, Dallas has responded with various ways. You got scratches out of aircraft windshields and out of face shields and out of, we've kind of homogenized all that information. But I really don't know. In my case, I keep after these windshields. As soon as I see a scratch, I'll sit and hand buff it out. But I thought this would be a great day. I have a couple of old windshields we can practice on to compare some of the products I have in stock already. Now, there's products I don't have. So if I don't have any, I can't test them, but I do have products that I know will take the scratches out of the headlights on my car. And I thought I'd share the information, do a little test in real time, and see if we can learn anything today, and maybe share it if we do learn something really productive. Now, one of the people that's asked me for this type of information is Coach Mike Ramirez out in California. He's got this beautiful Ducati, of course, and we had a phone call. How do I get rid of those windshield scratches? They look like they've been put in there by a buffing wheel with some rough stuff on it, or it wasn't cleaned before it was buffed. Well, he's got all this buffing wheels and professional equipment, whatnot, but we were going to go over the technique over the phone, and I said, you know what, I got to make a video soon anyway. It's on my bucket list, so today I decided I'd get off the duff and get this video is basically for Coach Mike Ramirez and his new Ducati. So the first thing is every bike in my little collection I have more than one windshield for. So it gives me an opportunity, if I did scratch or crack one, what I can do is just put the other one on. That's always just a good, safe thing to have. And in this case, I have a spare smoke windshield and a spare clear one. Even for the MT-09 with a painted windshield, I have a spare one. The reason is these take a beating, especially where I ride on salted areas, salted roads, and in the part of the year where the bugs, which is coming up very soon, where the bugs are prolific, it's a mess. And since we're sharing windshield information, this bike, when we used it for a track bike, used to crack the windshield on a regular basis. It would crack around the screws, and it would crack up here. And the only solution I ever had was to make my own carbon fiber windshield. And it's because this bike has been crashed more than once, in fact. And I'm sure there's some things in there that don't exactly line up, or you put stress on them or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But what I did when I got this windshield, when I did the restoration, this one I just left the screws just hand tight, and it seems like I've gotten away with it for 3 years now. Now, all the information might be appropriate for face shields too, and so I thought I'd share this information. And this came from Michelle, this cola, that what I use this for is every time I go riding, I get rid of the bugs and the crap off the screen. These things are like 60 bucks too, so I really try to maintain it and not let, here's what you don't want to have, a bunch of salt get up on here, or mud is the worst thing. Little dots of mud, and you just take a rag and grind it in. So that face shield's 2 years old now, and I think the cola helps keep it clean, and I never put wax on it. I always use that product that Michelle recommended, and it's worked great. So back down to the shop, and I'm going to try some of these products that I have and see if we can learn anything today. Now, this is the spare windshield for the 650, and you can see, I don't know if you can see it accurately on the video, I'm trying to put it under the light. There are some scratches in there, and a lot of these have been in here for years. This is a 13-year-old windshield on a 13-year-old bike. It's taken a lot of beating. It's got over 30,000 miles probably on this one. And so here you can see some of the defects and little stone chips and stuff. So what I'm going to try to do, I'm going to try to get them out and make this as simple as possible. So the basic technology is very simple. This is soft material. It's almost the softness of fresh paint that's only a day or two old. So the first thing is I want to get it clean before I grind any more scratches into it. I want to look for the worst. This looks like the worst scratch down here. So the first thing I want to do is just get a little soapy water, clean this up. I don't want to have any dirt or grit on it. And we're not going to paint this. But one of the things I had thought about doing when I couldn't get scratches out of windshields in the past was just sanding them with 2000 grit, or 1000 grit would probably be better, and then spraying clear and then buffing it just like I buffed the MT-09 windshield. The windshield doesn't know it's a windshield. It's a part of a motorcycle, and you can paint it, and as you've seen in the MT-09. So if we couldn't get the scratches out, the ultimate thing would be, the nuclear option would be, just try to get as 1000 grit, I'm guessing, 3 coats of clear, and then buff the clear. Now there's a deep scratch there, a really bad one here. This is the worst one, so I want to try to get this one out. So first thing I want to try to show that up close, and so you can see what we're dealing with. I'm not sure if you can see that, and that's a good one. That's not something that's going to buff out in 30 seconds. Now remember, however deep the scratch is, if the scratch is 1/1000th deep, you've got to remove 1/1000th of material. If the scratch is 2/1000ths, you got to remove 2/1000ths of material. But you want to do it with, you don't want to do it with 80 grit paper is what I'm saying. And you want to do, I think, and because I have 2000 grit available, I'm going to try to sand this piece out with 2000 grit and then buff it by hand. I don't even want to see if this is going to come out. I want to see if it's going to come out by hand before I use a machine. And then I want to try several of the products that I have in different spots. There's a gouge up here. And again, this is an old windshield. This is not a brand new one. So I'm looking at this scratch from a lot of different angles and trying to figure out, okay, I guess this is how much we're going to have to do to get this out realistically. And I think what I'm going to have to do is when I'm done getting out the scratches, the final thing is to then just take a buffer and buff the whole windshield out like it's a painted surface. Now, the good thing about buffing this material, you're not going to go through this. Unlike paint, you're not going to buff out the clear and gouge it right into the color. So I want to see how long, and I want to do this in real time. I don't want to do this in, in some fast forward thing. Even though I know somebody's going to complain about the sooner or later complain about the length of the videos, but an awful lot of people want to know how to do this. To be honest, this is not my favorite thing, but I do want to learn more, and I know people like Dallas that have owned airplanes have that aircraft technology because they fly into bird droppings and everything all day long. So I would think they have better products and better materials, but we're going to see if we can get this to come out. And let's just take a look at this up close and personal, as we always do. Now it looks like we're down deep enough that we've gotten rid of the scratch. In other words, we had a little valley and now we flattened it out. I don't know, but let me show it up close. No camera cuts again. So now the trick is, now we want to see which material is going to let that buff up back to its normal shine. It's the same exact technology as paint. So the first product I want to try is the grittiest. This is the grittiest. If you look down on the grit scale, it's compound. It's made to take a lot of material off, and it wouldn't matter what brand it is. It's the grit that's going to do the cutting. Now, of course, I have other grits, but I wanted to start with the roughest grit first, just to convince myself that this is not going to be the product I want to use. Maybe it is. This is the learning curve. I will start with the roughest, work my way up to the smoothest, and see which one is going to be appropriate for getting out these scratches. So keeping in mind, this is the roughest of the grits that I have available in my shop right now. This is probably almost as gritty as maybe it's even more than the 2000 grit paper. But I'm going to do this by hand, and I'm going to be pretty aggressive about it. Now obviously, a buffer is another choice, but I want to see how much of this I can do by hand. There's a simple reason, because a lot of times on a motorcycle, when you take a buffing wheel to a windshield that's mounted to the motorcycle, you put a stress on the screws, and if you crack it, it's like an egg. You only get to crack it once. So let's see how to compound, just doing it by hand, nothing fancy here, if it's going to bring that back up to being a flat surface that does not have the scratch in it. And if it does, that's even better. See, because if you use this grit, I'm going to pretend this is 3000 grit, and then you go over it with 4000 grit and over it with 6000, you always want the number to get bigger each time you do it. You don't want to start with smooth compound and then go to 80 grit sandpaper. You don't want to reverse that. You never want to go to a smaller number. So let's see how long this is going to take now. Again, I do all this on the motorcycle on a pretty regular basis because I don't want to have to replace the windshields all the time. I've replaced a few of them too. So now I'm looking at this, and I'm going to show this up close and personal. At this compound, because it's as rough as it is, has taken out about half of the scratches. In other words, if we had a 1 millimeter scratch, now we have a half of them, a thousandth or whatever. Let me take the camera off the tripod, show this up close. I don't want to have a camera cut in it. You see, it's got some of the gloss back, but you can still see the scratches. So what it would mean is you need to put a lot more elbow grease in that, or buff it with a machine. And we have both choices here. So the next thing I want to do is, because I've done it by hand, I want to get the small hand buffer and buff this part by hand using that compound. I just want to see how far we can go with that compound as far as getting rid of the original sanding scratches. Okay, now here's that area that we're working, and this is a pad that only has that compound on it, no other material. Again, this puts a lot of stress on the bike if you press on it when it's mounted to the bike. When it's out in midair like this, I think you're a lot safer. Obviously, the advantage of doing it by machine as opposed to hand, it goes a little bit quicker and a little bit less elbow grease. Now, since we've done this in real time, I just fast forwarded the middle of it. I think you can see, and I'll show it up closer, we've pretty much got the scratch out using that rough compound. So to me, I'm surprised at that. But I think the finer grit polish, an 8065, will get even more of this glossed up. But that took the scratch right out. And that was the worst of the scratches. So we're going to look around here for another guinea pig part we can work on, or a chip would be even better. But keep in mind, the technology is always that if that chip is a certain depth, you've got to flatten the material out until you get that there's no ditch, and then repolish it. And you saw with the repolishing, and of course what you have is, you have a pad. Don't put a pad with wax on it and everything. This pad only has that material on it. And then when I'm done with that pad, I'll leave it with that material if I'm going to polish aluminum or something. But when I'm going to polish paint or something like this, I only want to have a fresh pad, not a pad that's a year old. So my feeling is, given this material's hardness and the depth of that scratch, which is now not there at all, the compound did a very good job of doing that. Even though that's rougher than I normally would have started with something a little less gritty, that compound seemed to work, believe it or not. Now, here's another nasty scratch up here. This one I know is going to need a lot of work, so I'm going to try a different material up there and see which one seems to work the best. This looks like a better candidate to get out. This looks like somebody just ran a fingernail on that or whatever. So and here's some chips. So I'm going to sand this area out, and I'm going to use the finer grit product, the Evercoat, that's even finer grit than this. And see, it'll probably take longer, but I was very surprised that the rough compound took that scratch out. Once you get the 2000 grit and get it flat, that's the key. If you just take the compound and go over this, it's never going to be flat. It's going to be a little wavy. So the most important thing is get it flat. And in this case, we use 2000. If you use 3,000 or 4,000, it won't matter. Is to get it flat and get it down to where you don't have a ditch. You got to get rid of the scratch first and then repolish it. Now, it's usually the hardness of the material itself that determines in the very end how this gloss is going to come back and how quick it's going to come back. When paint is soft, it takes a lot longer, or should I say paint is new. And the same thing with plexiglass. There's certain grades of plexiglass, I'm sure, that do not buff up quite as easy as higher quality ones. The harder the material, the easier it'll be to buff. Okay, we got that relatively flat now. Now we're going to repeat the same process with the buffer with the finer grit product on it and a brand new pad. Always a hard thing to convince people to buy pads. They always want to use the old pad or wash it, and you can if you're going to do your car. But when you're doing something like this, now what I do, I leave this because I can use these pads, again, for polishing aluminum, polishing the headlights on my car, something that I'm not going to see under a microscope. But if I'm going to use a different material here, and again, I would have a pad. These are 2 for $3. They're terry cloth. They're not microfibers. They look like microfibers, but they're not. And these are the best investment when you really want to have something polished nice and you don't want to spend your whole life doing it. I found these to be very, very efficient. Now, this is the other product. Let's put this up on the screen. It's hand glaze. I want to show it up close though, because you can see where the part of it is. This is where it would be rough, the original product, medium, and then this is called a glaze. So this is almost like to finish polishing. So what's going to happen is this is going to do the same job, but it's going to take a lot longer to do it. So first, of course, shake it real good. And again, I want to thank Dale. Dale donated these products to the cause. And this is a very fine grit. I've used this already, and I know it works very well, but it is a super fine grit. So this may take, it's got a nice smell, by the way, may take just a little bit longer than normal. So we're going to see this, and the only way I can say this to anybody is if you have these products in your house, try one on some little spot, and pretty much guaranteed one of them is going to work. So let's just see if this is going to be as good as I hope it is in one little spot. And I always find for working on motorcycle parts, the little palm buffer, it's from Harbor Freight, it's about $15. It's way more efficient, way more easy to use than the big heavy one that you normally would use on a car. Just easier and easier on your arms when you got to do a couple hours of this stuff. Okay, so already I can see something. Where it is polished through, where I've done the complete polishing, it's a little bit shinier than the rough compound. Not much. And where it's just taking a long time to do it. But let me show it up close. And maybe you can see it that we've got that part of it and we haven't got the top. It's just an area. I can do the whole thing and just polish this out. But you've got to get it to go from the 2000 grit scratches. And that polish, by the way, this shine in real life is better than the shine we did over here. So my guess is if I was going to do this on my motorcycle, I would just skip the rough compound and go right to the smoother compound for this material. So that's a good test right there. But I have other products to test. Now, one of the products I have in stock here is Mother's Mag and Aluminum Polish. And surprisingly enough, this works good on a lot of products. It's a brand new tub, in fact. A lot of products. I just want to see how if this is going to be even useful before I get too carried away. Because I can always just use the products I have now to buff the rest of this. But you can see there's a patch I have not buffed out yet. So let me see if this is going to take the sanding scratches out quickly. If it does by hand, then I know it's going to do it by machine even quicker. And sometimes you just have to play around with the stuff you have. Now, keep in mind, each one of these plexiglasses, because of its age, could be a different shore hardness. And my durometer only measures tires, not plastic. But they do have durometers that measure the hardness of plastic. That would give you a clue how hard it is. And as it ages, a lot of times it gets more brittle and more hard. So let's see if this mag polish, I'm always curious. A lot of people think it's all in the polish. Well, it's in the grit. The grit is what's doing the polishing. And if you have that concept in your mind that you have to get it level first, the rest of it just goes very easily. It's easy to figure out. And then you need a really fine grit to get the polish back on it. Now it looks like even by hand, that took that did an amazing job. So I'm going to do up here, and then I'm going to look for another. There's a big scratch up here, but I have one other product I really want to try before I end this test. But this just gives you some food for thought as to how to do this. There's other ways to do it. I don't have the only way, and some of the products may work better or worse. But for sure, what we have in-house already will take any scratch out of the windshield. So the last test, and since we've been doing these one right after another, this is the even finer than the other stuff. It shows the grit to be 3000 here, and we're going to find out. This would be I'd polish the whole windshield. And now that we've got most of the scratches out, this will just put a nice gloss on the whole windshield. An 8065 is kind of a universal polish. It's actually the middle grade of 3 grits that they make. And I've had the one that's even less gritty. And this one seems to work better for me, for paint, and especially on soft paint. And these parts are pretty much the same as doing soft paint in a lot of ways. So the way this played out, and I did get to test several of the materials, they all work. Some work a little bit quicker if you're going to do it by hand, the rougher grits. If you have a machine and you're going to do it with the finer grits, just going to take a little more time. But either way, it'll get done. It's not rocket science. So I think if we were putting that back on a motorcycle right now, that'd be ready to go. That really came out nice. And I think it's a little bit of elbow grease, a little bit of work if you do it by hand, a lot less if you do it with a buffer. But it's certainly not a big deal. It's not rocket science. Now this is one of my spare windshields for the R1, and there are some gouges and scratches in it. And I thought I'd save this since we've done a good test today, and I don't want the video to get too long, so everybody's hollering at me again. But what I thought this will be, if I get some of the newer products that people are recommending, and I'll be willing to try any product anybody, has in mind. And if I can get them locally or off Amazon, I'll be fine. This will be another good test, and that's a different grade of plexiglass, but that'll be a future video. So let me just summarize before I end the video, is always start by sanding out the scratch till it's flat. Pick a compound. If you have some in inventory, try what you have already first. I don't think it's critical. I think you could do this with any of these products. This was certainly usable, and again, thank you, Dale. This took a little longer to do with the buffer. Maybe if you only do it by hand, that would be the choice. You have a buffer, this would be the choice. This polish, Megan aluminum polish, it even polishes titanium. That's great stuff, by the way. And the polish I have in stock for paint, I always use this for paint, but it seems to work pretty good on a plexiglass too. You notice how it's really a mild polish. And then when you're all done, put a coat of Flitz on it. And Flitz is 6,000 grit. The Flitz will protect it for 6 months. So having that in your inventory, and it's certainly not, there's no high-tech stuff here. There's no like, oh, I have the secret polish, and if you only use my polish, it'll work. No, it's just hand labor. It's mixing concrete, it's wet sanding, and if you're really detail-oriented, you can make any one of these products work. And always finish it up with some Flitz. So I hope this information was useful and enjoyable to watch and not too long. I'll hear about it whether it is too long or not. But it won't matter. This is another future video. This is a carbon fiber windshield I made. It's on video. You can look it up, carbon fiber windshield. My name in quotation marks. Now, this, if I was going to use this again on the FZR or modify it to fit another bike, I would repolish it. And I will show on a future video how to repolish carbon fiber parts that are 6, 7, 8 years old. They need a polishing from time to time. There's a few little tricks that'll make it easier. This will be a future video. I hope this polishing plexiglass serves everybody well. A lot of people have been asking, and there's other products. It's not a product-driven thing. It's an energy elbow grease-driven thing. And I think you could make any of them work. But if you do have a big scratch, I know it annoys me. The worst thing is a scratch in the wheels or the windshield. It's so obvious. I hate to have it. Anyway, those products all seem to work well, and I hope the information that I have on the video is usable. So for everybody who has a scratch in a windshield or a face shield or whatever, hey, you can thank Coach Mike Ramirez for inspiring me to do this video so soon. I was waiting to get some other products, but I figure Mike could use it to his advantage. And by the way, that's a beautiful Ducati. I always put a few pictures at the end of the video when I have time, just to remind me of the great times that I've been able to have, the great friends, the great relationships with other people and other families in motorcycling, and some of the great times that we've just shared over the years. It was no special thing. It just happened. And going up to Hawks Nest, going up to Perkins, going up to Perry's, and no matter what, no matter where you ride or all the people I rode with, we really did have a great, probably going on 10 years that we had the A-team in full force, and all of the bikes we rode and all the tires we wore out, and God knows what else, the track days that we enjoyed. It all comes together in one big package. Motorcycling is a great way to spend any amount of time. You always wind up making good friends. If you play your cards right, you can ride safe and enjoy it and get your full enjoyment without risking your life. And if you wear gear and you do have an accident, you stack the deck in your favor. Anyway, it's all good memories to me, and I love sharing them. I love making the videos and editing them. And the few people that really think they're not that good, well, we could still be friends too. It's not a problem at all. In fact, we always take the criticism with a grain of salt, because we know other people out there, they're just jealous of all the fun we're having. And that's the whole idea of having motorcycles, is to have fun. And I'm sad to hear that some people work on their motorcycle and don't enjoy it as much as we do. I think the fun we have doing these projects and working on bikes and whatever it is we do, even changing tires, at the end of the day, we have had some fun. And sharing the fun in video and in YouTube, just even better. Because not every generation of people has the amount of pictures we have, or the amount of video, or the amount of fun, or the great life that we've had. You just name it, and the list goes on and on. It's a great time to be a motorcyclist and be alive. And thanks so much for watching.